Hello, welcome back to the study of the book, The Fruit of the Spirit, the path that leads to loving as Jesus loved. My name is Steve Langford. I'm the author of the book, and I'll lead you in the study. The premise of the book is that in the 9 traits that the Apostle Paul called the fruit of the Spirit, Paul was outlining for us, drawing for us, a path to walk that will lead us to love as Jesus loved. In last week's session, we looked at love as the goal, as the first trait of the fruit of the Spirit. It is the goal for which the Spirit of God is at work within us. This is the objective that the Spirit of God is working in our lives to bring us to, so that we might love as Jesus loved. And we looked at what love looks like in a relationship. In this session, we're going to talk about the terrain through which the path goes, the terrain through which we walk as we go to love as Jesus loved. Now, this terrain may be strange, unfamiliar to many of us. Our culture generally does not deal in this terrain or walk this path. Our culture doesn't train us or teach us to walk in this terrain, because the path that leads to loving as Jesus loves goes through the interior, through the heart, through the interior realm of our lives, specifically through the inner spirit, the inner disposition out of which we live. Now, the Spirit is at work within us to create an inner disposition, an inner spirit that is marked by joy and peace. Joy and peace are what position us to be able to choose to love as Jesus loved. Now, this internal disposition, this inner spirit out of which we live, shapes how we view others and how we treat others, how we react to, respond to others. Our relationships flow out of what is on the inside, and thus what is on the inside is reflected on the outside in our relationships with others. Now, the interior disposition of the flesh, of our default human nature, is one of anxiety. This anxiety is tied to our formative years. It is tied to 4 basic emotional needs with which we all live: the need to be safe, the need to belong, the need to have some sense of power and adequacy, the need to have some sense of significance. We all need a safe place to belong in which who we are and what we can do is valued. Now, because of those 4 needs, we also live with 4 fears. The fear of being hurt rather than safe. The fear of being unloved, rejected, and abandoned rather than belonging. The fear of being inadequate and flawed and powerless. And the fear of being insignificant or less than or disrespected. In our formative years, those primary needs and those corresponding fears impacted us. And out of those, one became our primary need and our dominant fear. One of them became the primary anxiety out of which we live. We know what it's like to be hurt physically, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, intellectually. We know what it's like to be abandoned and left out. We know the pain of being inadequate and not measuring up. We know the pain of not being valued and treated as less than and insignificant. And we live with the fear that we will experience that pain again. And that fear is the anxiety out of which we live. Now, most of us are not aware of that anxiety. We have found ways to deal with it. We've developed patterns by which we keep it at bay. We have found ways to mask it, but yet it still drives our lives. Now, the ways, the patterns we deal with it are myriad, as multiple as we are, and as individual as we are. Some of us deal with the anxiety by being strong, and we take charge. Others of us live out of the anxiety and live a fear-based life. Others of us deal with our anxiety by trying to take care of others, or trying to keep others happy. Some of us keep busy. We become workaholics, always doing. We live by to-do lists so that we have this sense of accomplishment, that we have this sense of power. Some of us get angry. Some of us withdraw, build walls around ourselves. Some of us become the class clown, trying to keep everybody from getting angry. These are all patterns we use to deal with and to mask the anxiety out of which we live, so that the inner disposition of the human flesh, of our default nature, is a disposition shaped by anxiety and fear, and sometimes anger and irritation and angst. Now, the Spirit is at work within us to move us beyond this anxiety that shapes our lives into God's peace, beyond the anger and the angst and the negativity into joy. Because the truth is that we cannot love as Jesus loved out of anxiety and fear, out of irritation and anger and angst and negativity. So the Spirit leads us into the recognition of these things in the interior realm of our lives, so that the Spirit can lead us into peace and joy. For it is out of peace and joy that we can choose to love as Jesus loved. Peace and joy allow love to flow out of us. The Apostle Paul identifies joy and peace as the fruit of the Spirit. The Spirit works to produce joy and peace in our lives. The Spirit is at work within us to make joy the emotional tone out of which we live. The Spirit is at work to make joy the emotional inner disposition out of which we view all of life and respond to life and to others. Joy is that sense of freedom. See, anxiety creates this heaviness. It entraps us so that we become closed and self-protecting. We live on high alert with anxiety, but joy sets us free from that self-protective, high alert mentality. There's a lightness to joy, because there's not the big burdens that are weighing us down, that are stirring the anxiety inside of us. Joy is what makes us receptive, open, able to recognize the giftedness of life and the beauty of life, and to receive it. And so joy is marked by a sense of delight, a sense of embracing and engaging in and enjoying life. Now, joy is independent of our situation and circumstances. We can experience joy in the midst of challenging times, because joy is tied to God. The joy of the Lord, the Hebrew writers spoke. Joy is grounded in who God is. It is grounded in our relationship with God. Joy is tied to God's grace and God's goodness to us and God's faithfulness to us. So in other words, joy is the Spirit's work within us. It is the Spirit who cultivates this inner disposition shaped by joy. We cannot manufacture joy. Oh, we can manufacture pleasure and we can manufacture excitement and entertainment. But joy is something we cannot manufacture. We cannot create. Only the Spirit of God can manufacture it, create it within us as we learn to rest in God's grace. For you see, the secret to joy is peace. The key to experiencing joy is peace. Peace is what allows joy to flow from deep inside of us, so that out of peace, joy flows, so that with peace and joy we are in a position then to choose to love as Jesus loves. Peace is that inner quietness that replaces the anxiety's antsiness. It is an inner quietness and a deep sense of being okay, as opposed to being on high alert, looking out for what's going to happen next, what's going to hurt us next. Jesus and Paul both spoke of peace. In John 14:27, in the farewell discourse section of John's Gospel, Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not let them be afraid." Jesus promised his peace, a peace that comes from Christ, the peace of Christ. In his